Hello everyone, this is Jubair Khan and you are watching Joravi Nursing online classes. Once again I brought for you a GIT NCLEX question, that is part 3. We have seen part 1 and 2 in previous classes. So in that 25 questions we have covered. So now we will see from the 26. So be with me. Before starting this video, please subscribe my channel if you have not subscribed my channel, and like this video and share it to others. Okay, so let us start the video. So first 26th question is, when teaching a health fair about the prevention and treatment of hemorrhoids, which information should the nurse include? So question is from hemorrhoids. So prevention and treatment of hemorrhoids. So for prevention and treatment, what is your responsibility as a nurse? What information you will provide to the patient? So options are: avoid use of laxatives, avoid strenuous sports, avoid dietary roughage, and avoid extend sitting on toilets. So these options are there. So in which what is more important to teach the client? So avoid use of laxatives. So we know, if patient is having chronic hemorrhoids or constipation, so first we need to release the constipation, remove that constipation. So how you will prevent that constipation? If you will provide the laxative, then it will prevent the constipation. So it should be given, so it should not be avoided. So laxative should be given to prevent the constipation, which will be prevent the hemorrhoids. So this option is wrong. Avoid strenuous sports. Even though if hemorrhoids is there, patient should not do the heavy lifting and heavy activities and strenuous activities, but in sports as a group he and she can play. So avoid strenuous sport is not here important point. So avoid strenuous sport is not a right answer here. Third option is avoid dietary roughage. So patient should have a roughage diet, because roughage diet will prevent the constipation. Okay, roughage diet he should take. So this is also wrong. Avoid extend sitting on toilets. So when patient is sitting for prolonged period, it will do the stasis of blood. So it will lead to the stasis of the blood. Then it will increase the coagulation and stasis of blood in the veins of the that particular anal area. So it will lead to the hemorrhoids. So this is the main option and point we need to teach the client. Avoid extend sitting. Prolonged sitting should be avoided. Patient is having hemorrhoids, so it should be avoided. So this is the main point we need to teach the client. So here correct answer is avoid extend sitting on the toilet. So these three are wrong here. So now next question is, the need to avoid factor that increases intra-abdominal pressure in an important part of client teaching about the management of which problem. So in which problem patient should avoid the increased intra-abdominal pressure? So what, in which condition it is very important to teach the client? So options are acute gastritis, paralytic ileus, diverticulosis, and irritable bowel syndrome. So we know when intra-abdominal pressure has increased, so it will lead to the outpouching of the intestinal mucosa. That outpouching of intestinal mucosa, we will say that is diverticula. It will form a diverticula. So that is diverticulosis. So when it is increasing, it will lead to the diverticulosis. That will be a very worst condition. So we need to inform the patient who is having diverticulosis. So avoid that factor which is increased abdominal pressure. So in this condition, diverticulosis, patient should avoid that factors which increase the abdominal pressure. So intra-abdominal pressure should not be increased, should be avoided that factors in the diverticulosis patients. So we need to teach the client in management for this diverticulosis. So this is the here right answer. Okay, this acute gastritis and paralytic ileus and irritable bowel syndrome are not related with increase intra-abdominal pressure. So this is the main thing we need to teach in this client, diverticulosis. So here correct answer will be the diverticulosis. Now 28, question number 28 is which finding would the nurse expect when assessing the client with celiac disease. So patient is having celiac disease. So what are the findings nurse will expect? Okay, so findings, what are the findings she will assess? So we know what is celiac disease. It is a malabsorption syndrome in that it is inability to digestion of gluten. So gluten rich diet should be avoided when celiac diseases is there. So gluten where it is present, mainly bro, you know bro, BROW, bro means here B for barley, R for rye, O for oats, and W for wheat. So in these four things it will be having gluten. So gluten rich diet should be avoided in the celiac disease. So it is a malabsorption syndrome. So in this condition it won't be able to digest that gluten diet. So patient will have a, what are the things he will be having? So when he is unable to digest that things, so patient will have a steatorrhea. So fat and protein will not be able to digest by that patient. So steatorrhea will be there. So steatorrhea is fat in stool. So this will be seen. And anemia also it will be there. So anemia, how it will be there? Because patient is unable to digest and that unable to absorb the iron and unable to digest that protein. So patient will be having any anemia also, and patient will have a anorexia also, because patient is unable to digest this thing. It will be there in the that GI tract, then again it will lead to the constipation and all. So GI tract will be already full, so patient will not feel the able to eat. So okay, anorexia will be there. So here the correct answers are steatorrhea and anemia and anorexia. So these things are correct. And respiratory alkalosis, leukocytosis and melena is not related with the celiac disease. So here correct answer is steatorrhea, anemia and anorexia. So these findings she would expect. Okay, now question number next is, when a bowel obstruction causes ischemia, of the bowel, the patient is at significantly increased risk for which complications? So what happened when bowel obstruction is there? So it will lead to the ischemia. So when ischemia is there in bowel, so what it will do? It will increase the permeability of the bacteria. So when permeability of bacteria it will increase, so it will lead to the what? It will directly lead to the peritonitis. It will lead to the peritonitis. So here correct answer will be the peritonitis. Hemorrhage and embolus and hyponatremia is not related with the bowel obstruction. So here correct answer will be the peritonitis. So peritonitis is here correct answer. So when bowel obstruction is there, so main risk for peritonitis. So here option number second is correct. Now coming to next question, question number 30 is, a client who has had a jaws wired begins to vomit. Okay, what should the nurse's first action? So client have a wired in the jaw, he begins to vomit. So he started to vomit. So what will be your first action? Options are: insert a nasogastric tube and connect it to suction, use wire cutters to cut the wire, suction the client's airway as needed, administer an antiemetic intravenously. So patient having jaw wired and what is that? It is started to vomit. So what will you do first? So when you do the nasogastric tube and insert a nasogastric tube and connect it the suction, it will take a long time. When patient is having sudden vomiting, then first we need to go with the formula of ABC. Always we go with the formula of ABC. So first we need to clear the airway, because if patient is having vomiting, patient may aspirate. So we should clear the airway with the suction of the suction the client's airway as needed. So first we need to go for the suctioning. If we give the antiemetic and we do this, insert the suction of nasogastric tube, so it will relieve from the further vomiting. Okay, so at that time first we need to clear the airway with the suction. So here correct option will be the suction the client's airway as needed. Here one more option is they use wire cutters to cut the wire. So this is the last thing. When respiratory arrest and cardiac arrest is there, then we need to cut the wire and remove it. So here first option will be the suction the client's airway. So this is the first main important thing. Now coming to next question. Question number 31 is, in preparation of providing care to the clients immediately after a Whipple's procedure, the nurse should anticipate the nursing care plan may include. So we know Whipple procedure is, in this condition, the proximal part of pancreas and distal part of the stomach and duodenum, it will be cutted and it will be anastomosis with the jejunum, so that bile ducts and pancreatic duct all will be together connect to the jejunum. So that pancreas part has been removed some, so it will lead to the insulin dependent diabetes. Okay, insulin dependent diabetes. So in this condition what we need to do? So option we will see first, monitor the blood glucose levels, administer enteral feeding, irrigate the nasogastric tube with 30 ml of saline every hour, assisting the client to come out to promote bowel elimination within the first 8 hours post surgery. So if any GI surgery, so patient will be on first NPO. So we no need to give any enteral feeding. Okay, he will be on NPO only. So parenteral nutrition we have to give. So second option is wrong here. Irrigate the nasogastric tube. So it is, we can irrigate, but when doctor has prescribed then only we have to irrigate. So it is the wrong answer. We by itself we cannot do it. So first SCP should order the irrigation of NG tube, then only we can irrigate. So this also wrong. So this and this wrong. Now bowel elimination, when patient is on NPO only, patient is not eating by mouth, so no need any elimination, we need no need to go for this. So this is also wrong here. So first option is monitor the blood glucose level. So I already told you, when this procedure is there, so patient may risk for the insulin dependent diabetes. So in this condition we need to check the blood glucose level. So monitor the blood glucose level is very important in Whipple's procedure. So this is the very important point here. So this we need to check. Okay, so now coming to next question. A hospitalized client experiencing chronic abdominal pain. So patient is having chronic abdominal pain, is receiving maximal recommended dose of fentanyl. So he is getting the fentanyl by transdermal patch. So he is getting fentanyl by transdermal patch and intravenous morphine sulfate. So intravenous morphine sulfate is also going on. The client continues rate of pain at levels to 8 on a scale 0 to. So the client continues the pain. So pain level is 8 on a scale. The client agrees to include progressive relaxation techniques through guided imagery as intervention to the lesion. So these all things it is going on, patient is having this much. So what is the, at last this is the main question, which should be the best method for the nurse to evaluate the effectiveness of progressive relaxation in controlling the client's pain. So these are everything it is saying, it is nothing needed here. So main thing is this one, it is just time consuming question only. So they will make you to move around here and there, and then at last they will ask you some simple thing. So here what we need to do, which should the best method for assessing that evaluation of the pain. So how you will assess that pain, so that is the main thing. So how? Monitor the client's blood pressure and pulse rate, compare the previous reading, ask the client describe and rate the pain, ask the client significant to the other, describe any changes in the client's behavior, monitor the client's facial expression. So when we are talking about the pain, blood pressure and all, so this is not a correct way when patient is having more pain. So when we are going to check any intensity and rate of the pain, so first we need to ask the patient. So patient should decide, patient should describe it, explain it, how it is, pain intensity, duration, rate. So this everything patient should give. Patient should rate on the scale. So when patient is saying like this much pain is there, here is pain, and this much is intensity and duration is like this. So patient, we need to ask the client. So this is the best method to describe, best method to evaluate the effectiveness of progressive relaxation in controlling the client's pain. So patients will say where the client is having pain, whether it is decreased, whether it is increasing. So this is the best way client will say. So here another, these facial expression and all, we no need to go with this. So here main thing is describe, ask the client describe and rate the pain, how much he is having and all. Now coming to next question. Question number 30 is, a nurse is reviewing 33 is, nurse is reviewing the serum laboratory report of a 7-year-old child. So client is pediatric, from pediatric it is. So 7-year-old child is there who has been rehydrated following acute vomiting and diarrhea. So who is having acute vomiting and diarrhea is there. So which laboratory value changes should the nurse expect with successful rehydration? So the question is saying patient has a vomiting and diarrhea, but what happened after vomiting and diarrhea? We have rehydrated, so we have given rehydration therapy. Okay, rehydration, after rehydration therapy, which finding says it is successful, rehydration therapy is successful. So when patient is having vomiting and diarrhea, the client, this children is having vomiting and diarrhea, so what it will lead? It will lead, when diarrhea and vomiting is there, hemoglobin, hematocrit, blood BUN and serum creatinine, these all things will be increased. These all things will be increased in this situation. So hemoglobin also will increase, hematocrit also will increase, serum creatinine will also increase, blood urea nitrogen will also increase when vomiting and diarrhea is there. So in this condition, first we need to see the whether it is hemoglobin, saying hemoglobin was 9.5 mg per dl, now 12.5 mg per dl. So before it was 9.5, now it is 12.5. Hematocrit is 32, now 37. BUN it was 28, now it is 16. Serum creatinine it was 1.2, now it is 0.9. So before, when acute vomiting and diarrhea was there, it should be increased. So we know the normal HV level of child is 11.5 to 15.5. So when HV level is 11.5 to 15.5, so it should be increased with this 15.5 when acute vomiting and diarrhea is there, but in this condition it has written 9.5, it was not increased. Okay, so it was not increased, it is already 9.5, now it is 12.5. okay, this is normal, but when vomiting and diarrhea was there, it was not increased, so this is not the right option here. Hematocrit it was 32, so normal hematocrit level is 35 to 45%. So it was here 32, it has not increased in that time, so this is not the correct laboratory value to check successful rehydration therapy. Blood urea nitrogen, so blood urea nitrogen was 28, so normal blood urea for child 4 to 17, so 4 to 17 it is normal. So when it is increasing by 17, it is increased, so it was increased, it was 28, now it is 16, so it is the correct answer here. So it is the correct answer. So before, when vomiting was there, it has increased, now after rehydration therapy it comes to normal level. Now coming to serum creatinine, it was 1.2, so it has increased. Normal serum creatinine for child 0.3 to 0.7, so this is normal for child. Okay, for adult it is 0.7 to 1.2, so this is normal for child, so it has increased, so it was 1.2, now it is 0.9, so again it has increased only, it didn't come in normal value. So here correct option will be the blood, urea and nitrogen. So before it has increased when vomiting and diarrhea was there. So after rehydration therapy again it come to the normal value. So this is the main laboratory value which is the nurse expect with successful rehydration therapy. Okay, it will denote the successful rehydration therapy. Now coming to next question, which action should be taken by a nurse when admitting a client diagnosed with hepatitis C? So patient is having hepatitis C. So here, which action should be taken by a nurse when admitting a client diagnosed with hepatitis C? So client is having hepatitis C. So which action should be taken by the nurse? So nurse, what action should be taken by the nurse? So we will see the options are: admit the client to private room and initiate droplet isolation precautions. So client should be admitted in the private room and droplet isolation precaution should be taken. Admit in the semi-private room and initiate standard precautions. Admit in the clients in the private room and airborne isolation precaution. Admit the client in semi-private room and initiate contact precautions. So here two things we know, it is not related with droplet and airborne. So these two is wrong, first and third. Now coming to contact isolation. So it is also not spread by the contact, because it will spread by the when it is mainly like it is like a hepatitis B only. It will spread by the like if we are going blood transfusion and any sexual contact is there, then only it can be spread. So it is here correct answer will be the admit the client to the semi-private room. So we can put the client in the semi-private room and initiate the standard precautions. So standard precaution when treating the client like syringe, needle, handling the syringe and blood transfusion and all. So these things we need to do. So this is the main correct option here. Like hepatitis B, what we are doing, like same only hepatitis C is done. So standard precaution we need to initiate when patient is having diagnosed with hepatitis C. Now coming to next question is, when patient's medical history of indicates Barrett's epithelium, question should be asked which would elicit information about symptoms of disease. So Barrett's epithelium, what is Barrett's epithelium? It is the abnormal mucosa of lower esophagus. So abnormal epithelium of the lower esophagus will be there, which will lead to the adenocarcinoma. So it is related with the esophagus. So here right answer will be the we can see options are esophageal cancer, peptic ulcer disease, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis. So it is related with the esophageal cancer. So it will lead to the esophageal adenomas. So it is the main answer here is esophageal cancer. So first option is correct. These three are wrong only. Barrett's epithelium related with the abnormal epithelium of the lower esophagus. So this is the main answer here. Now coming to next question is, which client would be most likely not experiencing abdominal pain associated with peritonitis? So patient is having peritonitis, but he is not experiencing the abdominal pain. So which client will not experience? So client is having diabetes, client with bone marrow disease, client on high dose of corticosteroids, a client taking an anticholinergics. So we know client with diabetes, if client is diabetic, will not feel the pain. So this is wrong only. If client is diabetic but he is not taking so much of NSAIDs or any analgesics, patient will feel the pain only. So this is wrong here. Client with bone marrow disease, so it is unrelated with like this condition, and client is taking anticholinergics, it will reduce the secretions only, so it is not. So this is the option here. We see client on high doses of corticosteroids. So we know when patient is on corticosteroids, it is a reduce the inflammatory reactions and patient will not have a pain, patient will not feel the pain when client is taking the high doses of corticosteroids. Okay, so we usually provide the corticosteroids in the when patient is having uh, so much of pain is chronic pain is there, so when we that time we provide the corticosteroid therapy. Okay, so when so much intensive pain is there, then that time we provide the corticosteroids. So here correct answer will be the client on high doses of corticosteroids. So third option is right. Now coming to next question is, which dietary instruction should be given to the client when nurse is teaching him or her about the prevention of episodes of diverticulitis? So which teaching we should give to prevention of diverticulitis? So diverticulitis is outpouching of the intestinal mucosa, so pouching will be there. So for that prevention we need to first prevent the constipation. So when we will prevent the constipation, it will prevention of the diverticulitis. So options are eat low fiber foods and avoid sweets, avoid spicy and high fat foods, eat soft high fiber foods with 2500 to 3000 ml of fluids, avoid raw fruits, vegetables, brand products. So low fiber diet, so low fiber diet, if we patient will have a low fiber diet, it will lead to the again constipation will be there. So this is the wrong option here. So this is the wrong. Avoid spicy and high fat foods. So spicy is okay, spicy foods should be avoided, but high fat food will be avoided, it will not prevent the diverticulitis. Eat soft high fiber foods and this much fluid. So when patient is having high fiber diet, it will prevent the constipation, and client should have a more liquid diet, fluid diet should be there. So it will again prevent the diverticulitis and it will lead to the prevention of diverticulitis. So constipation will prevent it, then which will lead to the prevention of diverticulitis. So this third option is correct here. Avoid raw fruits and vegetables. So vegetables and fruits should be given because high fiber diet it should be given. Now coming to next question. Which factor found in client's health history indicate increased risk for colorectal cancer? So which risk factor increase the risk for colorectal cancer? So options are family history of colon polyps, chronic inflammatory bowel disease, long-term use of NSAIDs, diet high in fat and carbohydrate, and chronic constipation. So what are the things it will lead to the colorectal cancer? So if patient is having family history of colon polyps, so this is the risk factor for colorectal cancer. Chronic inflammatory bowel disease, a patient is having chronic inflammatory bowel disease, so it is also leading cause of or risk factor of colorectal cancer. So these two options are correct. Now coming to third option, long term use of NSAIDs. So it is not related with the colorectal cancer. If patient is using long term use of NSAID, it will lead to a colorectal cancer, so it is not. Diet high in fat and carbohydrate, so this is also wrong, it is not a risk factor. And chronic constipation, so chronic constipation is also not a risk factor for colorectal cancer. So here two options are family history of colon polyps and chronic inflammatory bowel disease. So first and second is correct only here. Now coming to next question. Question number 39 is, which assessment finding is suggestive of an imperforated anus in newborn? So in newborn, imperforated anus is there. So what findings you will assess in this? So what will be the findings when anus is perforated? So hyperactive bowel sounds, passage of meconium from the vagina, fecal vomiting, sausage like mass in lower left quadrant. So in this, when anus is perforated, what will be there? That meconium will be coming to the from the urethral meatus or vagina. So here correct answer will be the this one. This fecal vomiting and this hyperactive bowel sounds and sausage like mass in lower left quadrant is not related with the this anus perforation. Sausage like mass will be seen in the intussusception, that too will be in the right upper quadrant. It won't be in the left lower quadrant. Sources like mass seen in the interoception. It will be seen in the interoception where right upper quadrant. Okay. Fecal vomiting will be seen in the, if bowel obstruction and all this is there, so it will be seen in that. Hyperactive bowel sounds, again constipation and any problem in the GI tract, so that time it will be seen. But when anus is perforated, so passage of meconium from the vagina is the main assessment findings. Now coming to question number 40 is, which assessment finding suggests that the appendix of a client with appendicitis has ruptured? So which finding you will find, assess the finding when patient is having appendicitis and suggests that appendix of a client with appendicitis has ruptured. So which finding will say the appendix is ruptured? So options are, WBC count is 15,000 per cubic millimeter, temperature of 101 Fahrenheit, sudden relief of abdominal pain and onset of rebound tenderness. So when appendicitis is there, so WBC count will be increased only, temperature will be there, pain will be there, onset of rebound tenderness will be there. So here it is saying sudden relief of abdominal pain. So when appendix is ruptured, so appendicitis' main feature is pain. So when appendicitis is there, patient will feel a severe pain. So when it is ruptured, it will release the pressure. It will release the intra-abdominal, that pressure will be released, so that sudden patient will feel the relief from the pain. So here correct answer will the sudden relief of abdominal pain. When it is ruptured, so patient will feel relief from the abdominal pain. So here correct answer will be the third option. Next question is, the nurse is caring for a client diagnosed with end-stage liver disease, liver failure, which data indicates laxative lactulose is effective. So patient is having end-stage liver failure and is getting laxative. So which data indicates laxative is effective? Client no longer complain of pruritus, client's skin is no longer jaundice, client is alert and oriented on time, client's abdominal girth had decreased in size. So laxative lactulose, what is the function of lactulose? So lactulose will remove the ammonia from the GI tract, so it will decrease the serum ammonia level in the client. So that first it will do this lactulose will do the whatever ammonia is there in the GI tract. In GI tract already bacteria is there which form the ammonia, which do production of the ammonia. So it will decrease the ammonia level in the GI tract. So this is the main function of lactulose. So in ammonia, when ammonia level is increased in the body, what will be there? It will lead to the neurological deficits. So client will be having the neurological improper function. Okay, so if ammonia level is decreased, so client will be what? Neurological function will be okay. So when ammonia level is decreased, so client is alert and oriented to the time. So client will be alert and oriented time. And if ammonia level goes up, client will not be alert, or he won't be oriented to the time. Neurological problem will be there. So this is the main option here. We will check the client is alert and oriented to the time, because ammonia level will go down, then client will not be having any neurological problem. So this is the correct answer. So these are the questions will be there. So I hope you would have understood. If any problems comes, you are not understanding and all, please comment on this. So in further classes I will try to explain, and watch again and again this video, and you will get to know. And please subscribe my channel if you have not subscribed my channel. Further in other classes we will see some other questions. So total I will do 80 questions with image based. So 20 image based. After 60 questions, 20 image based questions will be there. So be with me. Please subscribe my channel and share to others also. If you people are not subscribing, watching the videos, but you people are not subscribing, please subscribe it my channel and like this video and share it. Okay, if you have any query, please comment in the comment box. We will meet in next video. Thank you all of you. Thank you.